Let's introduce you to State Senator Michele Reagan and candidate for Secretary of State, Republican. And Senator, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us. I really appreciate it, Michele.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We're trying to, I think people are saying, we're down here in southern Arizona. You probably know that. South of the Gila. If you just take I-10 south, you'll probably find us down here. But we don't follow, the northern Republicans as closely as we should. But I do want people down here to know you. And they do know you from your work in the legislature. But tell people about yourself, if you will, where you grew up, where you were educated, a little bit about your life very quickly. We'll do a quick
very
bio.
Quickly.
Well, no, take as much time as you like, please.
I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicagoland area, went to Illinois State University, moved out here with my family 3 days after I graduated from college to open up a business, and it's what I call not the American dream, but the Arizona dream. It's something we couldn't have done successfully had we stayed in Illinois. Overregulated, overmandated in Illinois and in many states. And so we came to Arizona, opened up a sign shop called Fast Signs. You do have some of them in southern Arizona. And we grew our Fast Signs franchise to be the largest one in the country and ended up selling it after a decade. So we are an Arizona success story and love Arizona, and that's actually how I got involved in politics, was watching what government can do when they come into a business or come into any kind of business environment and throw regulations at you and another piece of paperwork or another rule a business has to follow, and wanted to, when we sold our business, kind of was at a crossroads. Do I go off and work for someone else? Do I buy the rest of the company from my family? Because I did own a portion of it at that time. Ended up selling the part that I did own and saying, that's it, I'm going to run for office. I do not want Arizona to turn into Illinois or California or the place that we came from. I want it to stay a place where families like ours can come and set up shop and be wildly successful. So ended up at the Capitol, and lo and behold, it's 12 years later, and trying for Secretary of State, which I think I am perfectly tailored for, given all the work I've done in the legislature.
Well, you were in the House and now in the Senate, right? You were in the House how long?
I was in the House for 8 years, and now I'm finishing up my 4th year in the Senate. And I've had a really unique kind of run in the House and the Senate in the sense that I've focused on 2 main areas of law. When I was in the House, I fought really hard to get on the Commerce Committee. It's kind of a hard committee to get on because everybody wants to be on Commerce. It follows a lot of issues, a lot of bills. It's a fun committee. It's a powerful committee. And not only was I able to get on that committee, but within 2 years I was able to be the chairwoman of that committee. And I remained the chair throughout my tenure in the House. And then when I transitioned over to the Senate, I was the vice chair of the Commerce Committee, and then I was given a new role, which I'm particularly passionate about and is the reason why I'm running for Secretary of State. I was given the role of being the chairwoman, the first chairwoman that Arizona's ever had, of the Elections Committee. And if you look at what the Secretary of State's office is, the day-in, day-out functions, now everybody looks at the Secretary of State and says, oh, it's next in line to the governor. And that is true. But what the office is every single day is it does 2 main things. It handles a lot of business functions in the state, and it oversees the state's election system. And so if you look at what I've done the last 12 years for the state at the Capitol, it's been economic issues and economic legislation, and the last 4 years, election law and election legislation. So I'd like to say I almost feel like I've been preparing for this without even knowing it for a very long time. So I feel like I would make an excellent Secretary of State where I could almost walk right in and be able to perform quite well with knowing exactly what that office does.
Obviously,
as I've been doing their legislation for many years.
Well, with this background, you certainly understand politics. It's three-way.
I understand, unfortunately, that too well.
Three-way race for the nomination, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, you're going to have Will Cardin in this, who's heir to a fortune and will spend, I don't know, he's always told me whatever it takes, and that's what he said when he ran against Representative Flake for the United States Senate. Justin Pierce, also a legislator. It's amazing to me. Cardin, I've always tried to figure out, what is this guy all about politically? And I really don't have the answer to that, other than the fact if I've got the money, and I guess I'd rather do this than buy a yacht or 2 yachts or 10 yachts or something. But and for Pierce,
I'd rather have a yacht.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, if you and I had his money, we'd be in the Bahamas right now, off one of the islands. One of the things that's
well, I believe in free market, and I believe in if it's his money, and he certainly can choose to do whatever he wants with it. So I make a practice of not saying anything negative about my opponents, which does make me strange, I will admit, in the political landscape. I will say that in the governor or in the U.S. Senate race, when he ran, I believe that he spent around $8 to $9 million against Senator Flake, and I think about $6 million of that was his own personal money.
Yes, it was.
So I hope he doesn't choose to spend that for a Secretary of State race, because that is unheard of in Arizona politics. These are traditionally, for the past 20, 30 years, I don't know that anyone's ever spent more than probably $100,000 for this race. And so the ante has been upped, I suppose, is the best way.
Well, Senator, we could probably have a trivia contest on how many Secretary of States have become governor. I go back to the time I was in the Senate when you were a small child. In fact, I don't know whether you were born yet or not, but I recall the first governor that I got to know well was Jack Williams, and then on and on and on. But there's always this transition. Westmoreland dies, somebody leaves, Raul Castro resigns. The Secretary of State is the Lieutenant Governor of Arizona. So let me ask you quickly, and I want to get to some other issues about the Secretary of State's office, but what qualifies you? We talked about your qualifications for Secretary of State. What qualifies you to be the governor of the state of Arizona?
That's a great question. When I speak to people that have ascended to the governor's office not through their own choosing, meaning they didn't run for the office, for instance, Jane D. Hall, who has endorsed my candidacy, the thing that they say got them through it and gave them the ability to be successful was their legislative experience. If you were to wake up tomorrow and find out that you were governor, wouldn't it be helpful to know the various government agencies? Wouldn't it be helpful to know how to work within the confines of the legislature? One of the biggest jobs of the governor is to work the legislature during session. That is about 5 months out of the year. Doing the state budget. How big is the state budget? What do we fund? How much goes where? I've done 12 budgets now, and then some if you include special session budgets. You add to that the private sector experience I've had of over a decade before that of growing and nurturing a small business right up the street on Central Avenue in Phoenix, of exactly what it's like to be involved in the community outside of the Capitol. Those are experiences that would make me that's the lens that I would see Arizona through. That would make me able to serve you very well and wherever I was placed. So I would have no problem knowing exactly who I would need to put around me. Where would I go in different agencies in order to get things done? In fact, I can't imagine somebody waking up, so to speak, one day and becoming governor if they didn't have experience at the Capitol. I don't know how they would possibly function. That would be so overwhelming. It'd be overwhelming for anybody. But to not know, to not have walked the halls of the Capitol, I can't even see. And again, but that is from speaking to people who have gone through that.
Let me ask you about...
Been thrust into that position and, said, okay, I'm here. Now I need to lead.
I agree.
And that's what got them through it.
I think people in the Republican Party and independents as well are saying, I'd like to know these three people as well as I possibly can. This is a very critical nomination. Arizona's a very red state. There's a very strong candidate, I think, in Terry Goddard, and obviously two-time...
Very formidable, absolutely.
Attorney General. You better have the best Republican that you can come up with to run against him, because he's been there before. He has great name ID. A lot of people thought he was certainly better than Attorney General we have. I don't want to get into that. But here, let me ask you this. Separating you from Justin Pierce and also Will Cardin is the issue of dark money, which I think is absolutely critical. Here's Justin Pierce in the Arizona Capital-Times with his quote, saying that he understands the arguments against dark money campaigns financed by undisclosed interest, but he says there are legitimate reasons to allow people to get involved in politics without their names being made public. I think you take some exception to that. The idea that people can give great sums of money with no identification, could be a foreign country for that matter, could be somebody from where else, we don't know. But we should know. Tell me your position.
Disclosure is the absolute bedrock of our political process.
Thank you.
It has been. It should continue to be. All of this recent non-disclosure, secret, sit in a back room, let's decide who's going to become the candidates. This is all a pretty recent phenomenon. And the people that have kind of, I call it almost a loophole, the folks that have determined that, hey, this big Citizens United court decision has now afforded us the opportunity to not just give unlimited amounts of money, which I will say there's nothing we can do about that. But there is something we can do about disclosure, because if you were to give me as a candidate a contribution, I have to report that so that the people know exactly who I accepted funds from and also how I'm spending it. If you were to contribute to different organizations, the same kind of disclosure happens. But they found a loophole. They found a certain type of organization that you can set up with the IRS where disclosure is not needed. It's a loophole that needs to be closed. Every state is looking at ways to close it. And the people in Arizona, the few chosen ones that think that doesn't need to happen in our state, are crazy, because the people are going to demand it. And when they do demand it, what we're going to end up seeing, if we, the legislature and elected officials, do not take care of it, is we're going to see a ballot initiative. And when a ballot initiative happens from being in the legislature, this is something I know all too well, is when things go on the ballot, you tie the hands of the legislature. And if it's not written exactly 100% perfect on the ballot, you end up with a problem, because the legislature in future years, 10 years down the road, 15 years later, cannot go back and revisit the issue without putting it back on the ballot. That's a very dangerous territory. And so to stick your head in the sand, whatever level of government you're in, and say, we're not going to do something about this, is not serving the people.
Well, Michele and Senator, if I'll call you both if you don't mind, I appreciate that stand. I've always been concerned about the dark money. I think everybody should be. I do. And I've heard Secretary of State Bennett, I've heard Tom Horn and others say, we want to do something about this. They've done nothing about this.
I'm the only one that's actually stuck their neck out and ran a bill on it. Excuse me, that's a lie. let me say.
Well, we don't mind you lying. You're a politician, Mr.
I wouldn't say that is. I'm the only one who's gotten a bill out of committee that's actually done something. There was a Democrat senator from southern Tucson, Senator Farley, has also attempted to do bills, and I didn't actually. His bills were never given hearings. Actually, one time by me, because the way it was written, it was a mess. And so, instead of just shelving his bill and saying, oh, that's just terrible, I'm actually willing to work with both sides. I don't believe either party has a lock on good ideas. And so I promised to work with him, and over the interim, we worked together to craft the bill that I introduced last year. We both introduced it together, and we were able to get it through a committee, and we were hoping to be able to get it to the floor so that it could get an up or down vote in the Senate. And let's just say forces greater than us were able to block it from getting a vote, which was very sad, because had it gotten to the floor of the Senate, it would have passed.
Yeah,
I had the votes and then some.
I think
to the House.
I think that it's absolutely critical that eventually be done. I don't think that kind of dark money, that kind of secrecy, should be a part of the political landscape.
Well, we're seeing it in this election in greater numbers than we saw 2 years ago, and if it doesn't get fixed, we're going to see it in 2016, which is a presidential election, in amounts that I don't think Arizona voters can even imagine with things. And I'm not just talking about Republican money or Democrat money. Both sides are equally guilty. I mean, where every time we hear dark money, people like to say the Koch brothers on the conservative side. The Koch brothers are paupers compared to the George Soros groups, and compared to the Hillary PAC is supposed to be one of the largest PACs ever set up in this country. And you are absolutely correct. Without disclosure, you have no idea if that's not foreign national money. You have no clue. And so are we going to say that Arizona or elections in our country are open up to other countries coming in and buying it? Because you'll never know.
You would not know.
That's insanity.
Let's talk about you financing your campaign. How are you financing it? How do people become a part of it, please?
Well, I do not run on public financing. I raise my own money, and as I have since 2002, so it comes in all increments. My website is very easy to remember. It's votereagan.com, so VOTE and then Reagan, which is REAGAN, just like the Reagan who is a little more famous than I am. And people can contribute online. There's an address on there to send checks, or you can donate via credit card. And like I said, people think that you need to spend big money to be involved in the political process. You don't. I receive online contributions in any amount. $10. I just received some this morning for $10 and $15, and then I receive large amounts in $1,000 or $1,500 increments, and it all adds up, and it all helps get my message out.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you and Betsy Bayless. We used to talk to her all the time. We were big fans of her.
I am thrilled. She's
really
a big
great
supporter,
lady,
and has also endorsed my candidacy. Which what I'm most thrilled about is when you have somebody who was a former Secretary of State, like Jane Hull or like Betsy Bayless, who say, we want Michele Reagan to be the next Secretary of State. That means so much, because they've done the job, and then they look at me and they say, Michele Reagan can do it. And for me, that says so much more than a lot of other endorsements. Although I'm certainly not going to give other endorsements back. But when somebody who actually does the job of Secretary of State sees those same qualities in me, that means a lot.
Yeah, we like I said, we're big fans of her. I thought she was a great lady. Michele, will you come back off into the campaign? I know that really voting just starts in the next few weeks. Southern Arizona is critical. Many people nominated by the Republican Party to statewide office would attribute their support from Southern Arizona independents and Republicans. So
I'm down in Southern Arizona quite often. In fact, we have a couple of trips planned, and I believe one of my field coordinators was talking about getting me in your studio on one of those trips.
We're looking very much forward to that, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to do that. Thanks for the time you spent with us today.
Congratulations
for running, and I appreciate it. I've been in your office, by the way. I used to go to the Capitol, do a couple of weeks of broadcasts from up there, and I remember meeting you. I think you were in the house then, if I'm not mistaken. But
been
anyway,
there so long.
the years go by so quickly. It's just hard to remember them all.
Well, I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. And we will meet again very soon here. Thanks for being on our show today.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Michele Reagan, State Senator, candidate for the Secretary of State's office for the state of Arizona. She is a Republican.